The billionaire's daughter was born blind and lived hidden from the world until a poor homeless boy discovered a shocking secret that would change everything forever. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The rain hammered against the towering glass windows of the Harrison mansion like angry fists demanding entry. Inside, 7-year-old Emma Harrison sat motionless in her velvet armchair, her small fingers tracing the intricate patterns of her favorite music box. She couldn't see the storm raging outside, but she could feel its fury in her bones. "Daddy will be home soon, sweetheart," whispered Maria, the nanny, though her voice carried doubt. James Harrison was 3 hours late again. Emma's unseeing eyes turned toward the familiar voice. "Maria, do you think Daddy is ashamed of me?" The question hit like lightning. Maria knelt beside the chair, her heart breaking. "Oh, Emma, never think that. Your father loves you more than anything in this world." But Emma had heard the hushed phone conversations, the way visitors' voices changed when they didn't know she was listening. She was James Harrison's greatest secret, the blind daughter of America's youngest tech billionaire, hidden away like a shameful truth. 8 blocks away, in the shadows of a crumbling alley, Danny Miller pressed his back against a dumpster, trying to escape the freezing rain. At 8 years old, he'd been living on these streets for 4 months, ever since the car accident that stole his parents and his old life. His stomach growled viciously, but something else gnawed at him, a strange sensation he'd been feeling for days. There was something wrong in that big house with the golden gates, something that made his chest tight and his head buzz with invisible electricity. Danny had what his mother used to call the knowing. He could sense when people were hurting, lying, or hiding something big. And that mansion, it practically screamed with hidden pain. As the storm intensified, Danny made a decision that would change everything. He sprinted through the rain toward Harrison's estate, driven by an instinct he didn't understand but couldn't ignore. The security cameras missed him, a skill learned from months of avoiding authorities. Danny slipped through the garden, his heart pounding as he approached the massive windows. What he saw inside made his special gift explode with overwhelming sensation. A little girl, sitting alone in the dark, tears streaming down her face. But it wasn't just sadness Danny felt. There was something else, something the adults were all missing. Something about her eyes that didn't match what everyone believed. As Danny pressed closer to the window, Emma's head suddenly turned toward him, as if she could sense his presence. Their eyes met through the glass, and in that moment, Danny knew with absolute certainty that everything everyone believed about Emma Harrison was wrong. The biggest lie in America was about to be exposed by a homeless boy who could see what others couldn't. Danny's breath fogged the cold window as he watched Emma more closely, his heart pounding with the electricity of discovery that coursed through his veins like liquid fire. Her movements weren't right for someone completely blind. When Maria dropped a leather-bound book across the ornate sitting room, Emma's head turned toward the exact spot where it landed, before the sound even finished echoing through the mansion's high ceilings. When lightning flashed outside, casting brief but brilliant shadows across the room, filled with priceless antiques, Emma's pupils contracted, just slightly, but Danny's supernatural gift caught every microscopic detail with devastating clarity. "She can see," he whispered to himself, the revelation hitting like a freight train loaded with life-changing implications. But why would they lie about something so fundamental? Why would a father worth billions of dollars hide his precious daughter away from the world and pretend she was blind when she clearly wasn't? Danny's gift buzzed with dangerous electricity, sending sharp tingles up his spine that made his entire nervous system feel like it was on fire. There was something much darker lurking beneath the surface here, something sinister that made his stomach churn with instinctive dread. He watched Emma's delicate fingers trace intricate patterns on her ornate music box, patterns far too complex and precise for someone navigating purely by touch. She knew exactly where each tiny porcelain figurine stood, could predict their graceful movements as the haunting melody played. This wasn't the careful, hesitant behavior of a child who'd lost her sight in a tragic accident. This was someone who'd been very carefully trained to pretend, to deceive everyone around her. Suddenly, the mansion's massive front door exploded open with violent, desperate force that echoed through every room. James Harrison burst through the entryway like a man fleeing from death itself, his expensive Italian suit soaked completely through by the merciless storm, his normally perfect hair plastered against his skull. But it was his face that made Danny's supernatural gift scream urgent warnings, pure fury mixed with absolute terror, the unmistakable look of a man being hunted by monsters. "Where is she?" he barked at Maria, his voice carrying an edge sharp enough to cut through steel. Maria jumped backward, nearly dropping the delicate china tea tray she'd been carrying. "In the sitting room, sir. She's been asking for you all evening, worried sick." James stormed toward Emma like a man possessed by demons, and Danny pressed closer to the rain-streaked window, his small hands leaving desperate fingerprints on the cold glass. Every instinct in his body told him this was the pivotal moment that would change absolutely everything. "Emma, we're leaving. Tonight. Right now. This very minute." Emma's porcelain face went pale as winter moonlight. "Leaving? But Daddy, this is our home. This is where we're safe. Home." James laughed, but there was no warmth or humor in the sound, only bitter, crushing desperation. "Home is where people can't find us, sweetheart. Pack only what you absolutely need. We leave in exactly 1 hour." Danny watched Emma's reaction with laser-sharp focus, his gift analyzing every micro-expression. Fear flickered across her delicate features, but not the confused disorientation of someone truly blind, navigating unexpected change. She knew exactly what was happening, could read every emotion on her father's face with perfect, crystal-clear clarity. More importantly, she was terrified of something very specific, something that had absolutely nothing to do with being unable to see. As James began pacing the room like a caged tiger, pulling out his encrypted phone and making frantic whispered calls to unknown contacts, Danny made the life-altering decision that would either save this tormented family or destroy them all. He had to know the complete truth, no matter what it cost him. James Harrison wasn't always a man living in suffocating shadows, jumping at every unexpected sound and trusting absolutely no one. Just 3 short years ago, he'd been America's undisputed golden boy, the brilliant tech genius who'd revolutionized artificial intelligence before his 30th birthday, changing the entire world with his innovations. His company, Neuralink Solutions, was worth $12 billion and climbing, and every major magazine from Forbes to Time wanted him gracing their covers as the face of the future. He'd given TED Talks to thunderous standing ovations, been featured prominently on multiple Forbes Billionaires lists, lived in a breathtaking Malibu mansion that overlooked the infinite Pacific Ocean like a modern, technological palace. Presidents called him for advice. Other billionaires sought his guidance. He was unstoppable, untouchable, living the American dream at its absolute pinnacle. Then came the night that shattered his perfect world into 1,000,000 irreparable pieces. Emma had been playing innocently in their beach house's sunroom, her 5-year-old laughter echoing joyfully through rooms filled with priceless contemporary art and floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the ocean like living paintings. James had been in his state-of-the-art home office, taking an important investment call from his partners in Tokyo, when the massive explosion rocked their entire oceanfront estate to its very foundations. The official report, filed by investigators and fire marshals, blamed a tragic gas leak, a random, horrible accident that could strike anyone, anywhere, without warning. just one of those terrible things that happen in life. James found his beloved daughter unconscious among the smoking wreckage and shattered glass, her beautiful blue eyes open, but apparently unseeing, staring blindly at nothing. The trauma team at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center ran every sophisticated test known to modern medical science, sparing no expense. Traumatic cortical blindness caused by the explosion, they concluded with professional certainty. The neurological damage appears to be completely permanent. We're very sorry, Mr. Harrison. The media frenzy that followed was immediate, brutal, and absolutely relentless. Billionaire's daughter loses sight in tragic accident, screamed every headline from Los Angeles to New York to London. Harrison empire crumbles as CEO focuses on disabled child. His company's stock prices plummeted overnight. Investors fled like rats from a sinking ship. James's picture-perfect life became a public catastrophe, dissected by every news outlet in America. But James knew something the doctors, the media, and the entire watching world didn't know. Something that would have changed everything. In the hospital, during those endless, sleepless nights when Emma thought everyone was sleeping, he'd caught her doing things that should have been completely impossible for someone with traumatic brain injury. Tracking a nurse's quiet movement across the room. Turning toward the television when her favorite cartoon came on, even with the sound completely muted, carefully avoiding new obstacles that hadn't been there the previous day. "Why won't you tell them the truth, sweetheart?" he'd whispered one night, his heart absolutely breaking as he knelt beside her hospital bed. Emma's small, frightened voice had shattered what remained of his world. "The bad man called when you went to get coffee, Daddy. He said if anyone found out I could see, he'd make sure you had an accident too. He said terrible accidents happen to daddies who don't pay what they owe." 3,000 miles away, in a luxurious Miami penthouse that cost more per month than most hard-working Americans earned in an entire year, Victor Castillo smiled with predatory satisfaction as he read the latest bank transfer notification on his diamond-encrusted smartphone. $50 million, transferred right on schedule like precision clockwork. James Harrison was proving to be such a reliable, predictable, utterly controllable client, exactly the kind of victim Victor preferred. Victor had built his vast criminal empire systematically on other people's most devastating secrets, but the Harrison girl was his absolute masterpiece, a work of criminal art that had taken months of careful planning and flawless execution. The gas explosion that had supposedly blinded little Emma hadn't been an accident, of course. Victor had paid top dollar to the kind of specialists who could make calculated murder look like random, tragic misfortune, the kind of professionals who left no traces, no evidence, no loose ends. His original plan had been elegantly simple. Kill the child in a way that looked accidental, destroy James Harrison emotionally and psychologically, then acquire neural link solutions for pennies on the dollar when the grieving father inevitably self-destructed completely. It was a strategy Victor had used successfully dozens of times before, always with perfect results. But when little Emma miraculously survived the explosion with apparent blindness, Victor's brilliant criminal mind immediately saw an even more profitable long-term opportunity. Why destroy a golden goose when you could make it lay golden eggs indefinitely, for years and years? One carefully crafted, terrifying phone call to a traumatized 5-year-old girl, complete with specific graphic threats about what happened to beloved daddies who didn't cooperate fully. And suddenly, Victor owned a $12 billion technology empire without having to fire a single shot or risk any direct exposure. "Boss," called Rico, his thick-necked lieutenant, from across the penthouse's marble-floored living room. "Harrison's mansion just went completely dark. Security cameras, motion sensors, everything's been shut down. Looks like our boy is making another desperate run for it." Victor's predatory smile faded like morning mist in the Florida sun. In the 2 profitable years of this beautiful arrangement, James had moved Emma exactly 14 times, always staying precisely 1 step ahead of Victor's surveillance network, while continuing to pay like the dutiful, terrified victim he was. But lately, Harrison was getting sloppy, increasingly desperate, using his vast technological resources and connections to investigate Victor's carefully hidden organization. The billionaire was starting to push back against his chains, and that made him extremely dangerous to Victor's entire operation. "Time to remind Harrison exactly why he pays us so reliably," Victor said coldly, his voice carrying the deadly certainty of a man who'd killed for far less important reasons. "Schedule a personal demonstration. Something intimate. Something that will make him remember what happens to people who stop cooperating with our mutually beneficial business arrangement." He pulled up a high-resolution photograph on his tablet. Emma Harrison, supposedly blind, sitting peacefully in a garden filled with blooming roses. But Victor's professionally trained eye caught what everyone else completely missed: the way she avoided low-hanging branches too perfectly, the slight tracking of her pupils when colorful birds flew overhead. Danny couldn't force himself to leave, even though every hard-earned survival instinct screamed at him to run as far and fast as possible. He'd learned to trust those instincts completely during 4 brutal months on the unforgiving streets, but this time was different in ways he couldn't fully understand. Every fiber of his being, every electric pulse of his mysterious supernatural gift told him that Emma Harrison was in terrible, immediate danger that went far beyond anything he'd ever encountered. He'd discovered his strange ability after the devastating car accident that stole his parents and his entire world in one horrible instant. Suddenly, without warning or explanation, he could sense when people were lying, hiding something important, or planning to do something terrible. It felt like invisible electricity crackling through his brain, translating complex human emotions into sensations he could read like words on a page. His mother used to tell him bedtime stories about his great-grandmother Sarah, who could mysteriously see people's true intentions during the Great Depression when desperate people did desperate things. "Some ignorant folks called it witchcraft, baby," she'd whispered softly, stroking his hair as storms raged outside their warm home. "But I call it God's special way of protecting the innocent when the world gets too dark and dangerous for regular people to handle." Now, watching through the rain-streaked window, Danny felt his gift explode with the most intense emotions he'd ever experienced. James Harrison knelt beside Emma's velvet armchair, his face twisted with anguish so deep and profound it made Danny's chest ache in sympathetic pain. "Emma, sweetheart, I need you to be incredibly brave right now. Some very bad people are trying to hurt our family, and we have to disappear completely for a while. Maybe a long while this time." How long, Daddy?" Emma's voice was barely a whisper, but Danny could hear the bone-deep exhaustion in it, the soul-crushing weariness of a 7-year-old who'd been living in constant, paralyzing fear for far too long. "I don't know, baby girl, maybe. Maybe forever this time." Emma's carefully maintained composure finally shattered like delicate crystal hitting concrete. Tears streamed down her pale cheeks as she threw her thin arms around her father's neck, her small body shaking with heartbroken sobs. "I'm so tired of pretending, Daddy. I'm tired of being afraid all the time. I just want to be a normal little girl who can play outside." Danny's gift exploded with emotion so intense it nearly knocked him backward against the mansion's wall. This family wasn't just scared. They were drowning in absolute suffocating terror, fighting a losing battle against monsters they couldn't see or defeat, carrying secrets that were slowly destroying them from the inside out. That's when Danny made the life-altering decision that would either save them all or get everyone killed. He picked up a small, smooth stone from the garden pathway and tapped it gently against the window glass. Both Emma and James froze like deer, hearing a hunter's careful footstep in the forest. "Someone's there," Emma whispered, her voice sharp with the kind of primal fear that comes from months of running and hiding from invisible enemies. James moved protectively in front of his daughter, but Danny tapped again. 3 short taps, 3 long ones, 3 short. Again. SOS in Morse code. Something his father had patiently taught him during camping trips that now felt like precious memories from another lifetime. Emma's head tilted with curiosity. "Daddy, they're asking for help." James stared at the boy through the rain-streaked window, his brilliant mind racing through 1,000 possibilities and finding no logical explanation that made any sense. A homeless child couldn't possibly understand the deadly complexity of their situation, but something in those dark, knowing eyes suggested otherwise. Suggested impossible things that made James's hands tremble uncontrollably. "Stay exactly where you are," James whispered urgently to Emma, then moved toward the mansion's side door, his expensive shoes completely silent on the polished marble floor. Danny was waiting patiently in the garden when James stepped into the freezing rain, the billionaire's handmade Italian leather shoes immediately soaking through as he splashed through rapidly growing puddles. Up close, James looked like a completely different man from the confident, powerful CEO who'd once graced magazine covers worldwide, exhausted, haunted, like someone carrying the unbearable weight of the entire world on his shoulders. "Who are you?" James demanded, his voice barely controlled, every word carefully measured and weighted. "Danny Miller, and I know your daughter isn't really blind, sir." The words hung in the storm-filled air like a death sentence waiting to be carried out by an invisible executioner. James felt his knees nearly buckle, his vision swimming as panic crashed over him in overwhelming waves. If this homeless boy knew the truth, how many other people had figured it out? How long before Victor's organization discovered their most dangerous secret was exposed? "You're completely wrong," James said desperately, his voice cracking with the strain of maintaining a lie that was killing him. "Emma was in a terrible accident. The doctors at Cedars-Sinai confirmed everything. The gas explosion was fake." Danny interrupted with devastating certainty, his supernatural gift reading James's emotions like an open book written in letters of fire. "Someone's been making you pretend she's blind for a long time. Someone who calls her when you're not around and scares her into keeping the secret." James's face went white as fresh snow, his lips moving soundlessly as he struggled to process what this impossible child somehow knew. "How could you possibly know about—" "Because I can see things other people can't," Danny said simply, rain streaming down his young face like tears from heaven. "My mama called it the knowing, and right now, I know you're about to make the biggest mistake of your life by running away again, instead of fighting back against these monsters." You don't understand what we're dealing with," James whispered desperately. "These people will kill us both if we stop cooperating. They'll make it look like an accident, just like they did with the explosion." "They're going to kill you anyway," Danny said with the kind of absolute certainty that only comes from genuine supernatural insight. "That's what bad people do when they're finished using someone. They eliminate loose ends, but I can help you stop them before that happens." James looked down at this 8-year-old boy, homeless and completely alone, offering to take on a criminal organization that had successfully terrorized his family for 2 years. It should have been absurd, laughable, but something in Danny's eyes made James feel something he'd almost forgotten existed. Hope. "How?" James whispered, his voice barely audible above the storm. Danny smiled, and for the first time in months, James Harrison felt like maybe, just maybe, they had a chance, because they don't know about me yet. Oh, at that exact moment, both their phones buzzed simultaneously with an identical message. "Stop talking to the boy immediately. You have exactly 1 hour to disappear completely, or sweet little Emma learns what real blindness feels like. Don't test me, Harrison. They'd been watching everything. The message from Victor hung between them like a death sentence written in digital ink. James's hands shook as he stared at his phone, watching the timer that had appeared. 58 minutes, 42 seconds, 41 seconds, 40 seconds, counting down to Emma's destruction. "We can't run anymore," Danny said with supernatural certainty, his young voice cutting through James's panic like a blade. "Every time you've run before, he's found you faster. He's not just tracking your money or your phones, he's tracking your fear." James looked at this homeless boy, rain streaming down both their faces, and made a decision that went against every protective instinct he'd developed. "What exactly are you proposing?" "We go back inside. We pretend to pack. But instead, we use your technology to trace his message, find where he's watching from. And we end this tonight." Danny's eyes burned with determination beyond his years. "My gift is telling me something important. He's not as powerful as he wants you to believe. He's desperate too." They rushed inside where Emma sat frozen in terror, having overheard everything. "Daddy, what did the message say?" James knelt beside her, his heart breaking as he saw his 7-year-old daughter trying to be brave. "Emma, I need you to trust me completely. This nice boy is going to help us stop the bad man forever." Emma turned toward Danny, and for the first time in 2 years, she let her true sight show completely. "You can really see the truth about people?" "Yes," Danny said softly. "And the truth is, you've been the bravest little girl in the world, but you don't have to be afraid anymore." James was already at his computer, his fingers flying across the keyboard. The message had come through an encrypted channel, but James Harrison hadn't built a tech empire by accepting limitations. Within minutes, he'd traced the signal to its source, a surveillance van parked 3 blocks away. "He's been watching this house for hours," James whispered. "But if he's that close, it means he's confident we can't fight back." He turned to Danny. "What exactly can your gift tell us about him?" Danny closed his eyes, extending his supernatural senses toward the van. What he felt made his blood run cold. "He's not alone. There are 3 men with him and—" Danny's eyes snapped open. "He's planning to take Emma tonight, whether you pay or not. The threats aren't to make you comply. They're to keep you distracted while he moves in for the kill." The countdown on James's phone hit 45 minutes. Time was running out, but for the first time in 2 years, James Harrison felt like he was fighting back instead of just running away. "Then we give him exactly what he doesn't expect. We go to him first." Emma grabbed her father's hand. "I'm going with you." "Absolutely not! Daddy, I've been pretending to be helpless for 2 years, but I'm not helpless anymore, and we're strongest when we're together." Her young voice carried a steel that reminded James why he'd fallen in love with her mother, a woman who'd never backed down from a fight. Outside, Victor Castillo smiled as he watched the thermal imaging from his surveillance equipment. The Harrison family was packing frantically, exactly as expected. In 43 minutes, when they tried to run, his team would be waiting. Emma Harrison's usefulness was about to end permanently. What Victor didn't know was that James Harrison was no longer the broken man he'd been manipulating. And he had absolutely no idea that an 8-year-old boy with supernatural abilities was about to turn his perfect plan into his worst nightmare. Victor Castillo had orchestrated dozens of operations like this one, and they always followed the same predictable pattern. The target would panic, make desperate attempts to escape, then be captured exactly where Victor expected them to be. It was a formula that had never failed him. But as he watched his thermal imaging display from the surveillance van, something felt different. The heat signatures in the Harrison mansion weren't moving with the chaotic desperation he'd expected. Instead, they seemed to be moving with purpose, with a plan. "Rico, are you seeing this?" Victor's voice carried a note of concern for the first time in years. His lieutenant leaned over the screen. "They're not packing, boss. They're—" "What are they doing?" Inside the mansion, James was teaching Danny how to use the security system he'd installed. Every camera, every sensor, every electronic device in this house is connected to my private server. If we're going to face Victor, we need to know exactly what we're dealing with. Danny's gift was working overtime, translating the emotions of the men in the van into sharp, clear insights. There are 4 of them total. Victor is the calm one. He thinks he's in complete control, but there's something else. Danny frowned, concentrating harder. He's afraid of someone. Someone higher up the chain who doesn't know about his Emma plan. "What do you mean?" James asked, his fingers pausing over the keyboard. "This isn't just about money anymore," Danny said with growing certainty. "He was supposed to kill Emma 2 years ago and failed. Someone's been pressuring him to finish the job. That's why he's here personally. This is his last chance." Emma, who had been quietly listening, suddenly spoke up. "The phone calls changed last month. He used to sound confident, but lately he's been angry, desperate." James felt pieces clicking into place. If Victor's being pressured by his bosses, then he's not as powerful as we thought. He's vulnerable. That's when Danny's gift exploded with warning signals. "They're moving! 4 minutes ahead of schedule. Victor just got a phone call that made him furious." Outside, Victor screamed into his phone. "What do you mean the FBI is asking questions? I told you this would be clean." He slammed the phone down and turned to his team. "Change of plans. We go now. Full force, no subtlety. Kill Harrison, grab the girl, make it look like a home invasion gone wrong." Through the security cameras, James watched 4 armed men exit the van and approach his house with military precision. But he wasn't the same helpless victim they'd been terrorizing for 2 years. He was James Harrison, the man who'd built an empire from nothing, and he'd been preparing for this moment since Danny had opened his eyes to the truth. "Emma, go to the safe room exactly like we practiced," he said calmly. "Danny, it's time to see if your gift works through electronic systems." "What do you mean?" Danny asked, though his gift was already telling him the answer. James smiled grimly as he pulled up the house's integrated AI system, the same technology that had made him billions. "You can sense people's emotions and intentions. This AI can control every electronic device within a 5-mile radius. What happens if we combine them?" Danny placed his hands on the keyboard and immediately felt his gift expand through the network like electricity through copper wire. Suddenly, he wasn't just sensing the 4 men outside. He could feel their heartbeats, their breathing patterns, their exact locations in real time. "I can see them," Danny whispered in amazement. "All of them. And I can predict exactly where they're going to move next." Victor's team reached the front door just as every light in the house went out simultaneously. Emergency systems activated, sealing doors and windows. The house's sound system began playing a recording James had prepared. "You are surrounded. Surrender now, and you will not be harmed." But Victor wasn't surrendering. He was adapting, just like he always had. And he had one final card to play, one that would force James Harrison to choose between his daughter's life and his own. Victor's voice echoed through the darkness surrounding the Harrison mansion, amplified by the portable speaker system his team always carried. "Very clever, Harrison. But you've forgotten something important. I don't need to come inside to destroy everything you love." James felt ice form in his veins. Through the security cameras, he watched Victor hold up a device that looked like a military-grade radio. "Do you know what this is?" "It's a direct line to 3 other teams positioned around the city. One team is at Emma's school. Another is at your brother's house in Portland. The third is watching your late wife's parents in Sacramento." Emma gasped from the safe room where she was supposed to be hiding. "Daddy, he's lying, right? He can't hurt Uncle Michael." But Danny's gift was screaming warnings. He's not lying. There really are other teams, and he's about to give them orders to... Danny's face went white. "We have to stop him now." "Here's how this works," Victor continued, his voice carrying the confidence of a man who held all the cards. "You have 30 seconds to open that door and walk outside with your hands up, or I make 3 phone calls that will devastate your entire family tree. Your choice, James." Through his advanced security system, James could see Victor's finger hovering over the radio transmitter. One button press would send kill orders to teams across 3 states. The empire of fear Victor had built around the Harrison family was about to reveal its true scope. 20 seconds, James. I can see you through those cameras you're so proud of." But James wasn't looking at Victor anymore. He was looking at Danny, whose supernatural gift had suddenly exploded with an intensity that made the boy stagger backward. "What is it?" James whispered urgently. "He's lying about the teams," Danny said, his voice filled with the electric certainty of absolute truth. "His gift told me. There's only one other team, and they're not at your family's houses. They're..." Danny's eyes widened. "They're coming here as backup. That radio call is just a bluff to make you surrender." 10 seconds, Harrison!" Emma's voice crackled through the intercom from the safe room. "Daddy, Danny's right. When the bad man used to call me, sometimes I could hear other voices in the background, but tonight I only hear one other person in that van." James felt the pieces fall into place. Victor was desperate, alone, except for his 3-man team, and completely cut off from whatever criminal organization had been pressuring him. This wasn't a position of strength. This was a last, desperate gamble by a man who'd lost everything. "Time's up!" Victor shouted. "Say goodbye to..." That's when James Harrison revealed why he'd become one of the world's most successful entrepreneurs. Instead of surrendering or hiding, he activated a system he'd been building in secret for 2 years, ever since the first blackmail demand. Every streetlight within 6 blocks suddenly blazed to life with the intensity of stadium floodlights. Car alarms began wailing throughout the neighborhood. Emergency services received automated calls reporting an armed assault in progress, and most importantly, the advanced facial recognition system James had quietly installed throughout the city's traffic camera network had just identified Victor Castillo as a wanted man. "You see, Victor," James's voice now boomed from speakers throughout the neighborhood, "I haven't just been hiding for 2 years. I've been hunting. I know exactly who you are, where you live, and what you've done to dozens of other families." Through his surveillance network, James watched Victor's confident expression crumble into panic. "This is impossible. You're just a broken man hiding with his damaged daughter." "I'm James Harrison," came the reply, filled with steel and certainty. "And I don't hide anymore." Police sirens began wailing in the distance, growing closer by the second. Victor's team looked at their leader with growing desperation. They'd signed up to terrorize helpless victims, not to face a tech genius who'd turned the entire city into his personal security system. But Victor still had one final devastating card to play, one that would force James to choose between justice and his daughter's life. Victor's panicked expression suddenly transformed into something far more dangerous, the smile of a man who'd been saving his most devastating weapon for exactly this moment. As police sirens grew louder in the distance, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a device that made James's blood turn to ice water. "You recognize this, don't you, James?" Victor held up what looked like a modified smartphone connected to a small black box. 2 years of surveillance taught me something interesting about your daughter. She still has nightmares about the explosion. Terrible, screaming nightmares where she begs for her daddy to save her. Danny's gift exploded with horror so intense it nearly dropped him to his knees. "James, that device. It's not what we think, it's a neural frequency transmitter." Victor finished with predatory satisfaction. tuned specifically to Emma's brainwave patterns. One button press, and I can trigger a seizure that will cause actual permanent blindness or worse. Emma's terrified voice crackled through the intercom. "Daddy, what's he talking about? What's that machine?" James felt the world spinning around him. "You're lying. That technology doesn't exist." "Doesn't it?" Victor's smile widened. "Who do you think funded the research that led to your precious neural link solutions? Did you really believe you built that empire all by yourself?" He laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "My organization has been watching you since college, James. Funding your research, steering your development, waiting for the perfect moment to take control." The revelation hit James like a physical blow. His entire career, his company, his fortune, all of it had been orchestrated by the same criminals who destroyed his family. "That's impossible." "Check your early investment records," Victor suggested mockingly. Shell companies, offshore accounts, mysterious angel investors who never wanted to meet in person. "We've owned you for 15 years, James. The only question was when we'd collect." Danny's supernatural gift was screaming warnings, but not about the device in Victor's hand. Something else, something bigger and more terrible, was about to be revealed. "James, he's telling the truth about your company. But there's something else. Something about Emma that he doesn't want us to know." "Shut up, boy," Victor snarled, his confidence cracking slightly. "You don't know what you're dealing with." But Danny pressed on, his gift cutting through years of lies like a supernatural scalpel. The explosion 2 years ago, it wasn't meant to make Emma blind. It was meant to activate something they put inside her when she was a baby. Emma's voice from the safe room was barely a whisper. "Daddy, what is he talking about? What did they put inside me?" Victor's face had gone completely white. "How could you possibly?" "Because I can see the truth," Danny said with growing horror. "They've been using Emma as a test subject her entire life. The blindness was never the point. They needed to see if the neural implants they've been developing would work on human children." James felt reality crumbling around him. "What neural implants?" "The ones they've been testing through your own company," Danny said, his voice filled with sick understanding. Neuralink Solutions wasn't just making AI interfaces for computers. They were making brain control devices for people, and Emma has been their primary test subject since birth. Victor raised the device, his finger hovering over the trigger. "Enough. One more word, and I activate every implant in her brain simultaneously. She'll be dead in seconds." But Emma's voice came through the intercom, and it wasn't the voice of a terrified 7-year-old anymore. It was the voice of someone who just understood the complete truth about her life. "Daddy, I can feel them. The things in my head. They've been there so long I thought they were just part of me." Police cars screeched to a halt outside the mansion, but James barely noticed. His daughter, his precious, innocent daughter, had been a victim of medical experimentation her entire life, and he'd unknowingly helped create the technology that enslaved her. "Here's your choice, James," Victor said with finality. "Surrender now and let us continue our research, or watch your daughter die knowing that every breath she's ever taken has been at our sufferance." That's when Emma made the decision that would change everything. "Daddy, I want you to let them activate the devices." "Emma, no! I'm tired of being afraid, and I think I know how to turn their weapons against them." Emma's words hung in the air like a challenge thrown down before gods. Through the intercom, her 7-year-old voice carried a strength that reminded James exactly why he'd fallen in love with her mother, a neuroscientist who'd never backed down from any challenge, no matter how impossible. "Emma, sweetheart, you don't understand what those devices can do," James pleaded desperately. "But I do, Daddy," Emma replied with eerie calm. "I've been living with them my entire life, and I've been learning how they work every time they activated during my nightmares. They're not just controlling my brain, they're connected to it. Which means the connection works both ways. Danny's gift exploded with understanding so brilliant it nearly blinded him. She's right. The neural implants aren't just receivers, they're transceivers. If Emma can learn to control them instead of being controlled by them, Victor's confident expression began to crack. That's impossible. A child can't override military-grade neural control technology. Can't she? Emma's voice now carried an edge that made everyone freeze. Tell me, Victor, how do you think I've been able to fool everyone about my blindness for 2 years? How do you think I learned to control my pupil responses, my eye movements, my reactions to light? Through the security cameras, James watched Victor's face go pale as the implications hit him. You've been practicing with the implants, training yourself. Every single night, Emma confirmed. Every nightmare, every terrifying phone call, every moment of fear. I was learning how your technology works from the inside out. And Danny, with his gift, he's been helping me understand things I couldn't figure out by myself. Danny placed his hands on the computer keyboard, his supernatural abilities merging with James's AI system. I can feel the network, Emma. The implants aren't just in your head, they're connected to a larger system. A system that's been monitoring other children. The revelation hit James like lightning. How many children? 17 that I can sense, Danny said, his voice filled with horror and determination. All over the country, all with families being blackmailed, all living in fear, all being used as test subjects. Victor raised his device higher, his hand shaking now. Enough! I'm activating the neural override now. Emma dies in 3 seconds unless... Unless what? Emma's voice cut through his threat like steel through silk. Unless you get to keep torturing children forever? I don't think so. What happened next would be talked about in scientific journals for decades to come. Emma Harrison, through a combination of 7 years of unconscious training and supernatural assistance from an 8-year-old boy with the knowing, did something that every expert said was impossible. She took control of her own neural implants. The effect was immediate and devastating. Victor's control device began sparking and smoking as feedback surged through the network. Every screen in the Harrison mansion flickered with neural patterns that looked like digital lightning. And most impossibly of all, Emma's voice now came not just through the intercom, but through every connected device within a 5-mile radius. My name is Emma Harrison. Her voice echoed from phones, computers, car radios, and television screens throughout the city. For 2 years, bad people have been using me and 16 other children as test subjects for brain control experiments, but we're not victims anymore. Police officers surrounding Victor's van stumbled backward as their radio equipment began broadcasting Emma's voice. News stations across the country found their signals hijacked by a 7-year-old girl who was single-handedly exposing the greatest criminal conspiracy in American history. Victor Castillo and his organization have been experimenting on children, Emma continued, her voice now reaching millions of people simultaneously. But they made one mistake. They taught us how to use their own technology against them. Victor's device exploded in his hands, sending him sprawling. Around the country, other members of his organization found their control systems failing as 17 children simultaneously fought back using technology that had been meant to enslave them. Through the security cameras, James watched Victor being arrested by police officers who looked like they'd just witnessed a miracle, which, in many ways, they had. But Emma's voice, now speaking from the mansion's safe room, where she sat surrounded by screens showing neural patterns like digital fireworks, had one final message. Daddy, I think I know how to find all the other children they've taken, but we're going to need help from someone very special. Danny looked at James with eyes that sparkled with supernatural understanding. She's talking about her mother, isn't she? James felt his world shift on its axis one final time. Emma, sweetheart, your mother died when you were 3 years old. No, Daddy, Emma said, with the certainty of someone who'd just accessed memories that had been locked away by neural manipulation for 4 years. She didn't die. They took her because she was getting too close to discovering what they were doing to me. But I know where she is now. And I can get us there, Danny added, his gift showing him possibilities that stretched beyond anything they'd imagined. But we're going to need to do something that's never been done before. Emma's image appeared on every screen in the house, her 7-year-old face glowing with determination and power that seemed impossible for someone so young. Are you ready to save 17 children and bring home a mother who's been fighting to get back to her daughter for 4 years? James Harrison looked at his daughter, his brilliant, impossibly brave daughter who'd just defeated a criminal empire using their own weapons against them, and knew that their greatest adventure was just beginning. Tell me what we need to do. The warehouse in Nevada looked abandoned from the outside, but Danny's gift told a completely different story. As their private jet descended toward the makeshift landing strip James had arranged, Danny could feel the pain radiating from the building like heat waves in the desert. 17 families worth of agony concentrated into one nightmarish location. She's there, Emma said softly, her neural implants now fully under her control, displaying patterns of brain activity on James's tablet that resembled digital tears. Mummy's there, and she's been fighting so hard to get back to me. 3 days had passed since Victor's arrest made international headlines. Child neural experimentation ring exposed by 7-year-old victim, screamed newspapers around the world. But the real story was just beginning, because Victor had been telling the truth about one thing. He was just a middle manager in an organization that stretched into the highest levels of government and technology. Dr. Sarah Chen, the FBI's lead investigator on neural crimes, met them at the landing strip with a team of specialists who looked like they'd stepped out of a science fiction movie. Mr. Harrison, I have to warn you, what we're about to attempt has never been tried before. Using your daughter's neural connection to locate and free 17 other children simultaneously. Will work, Emma interrupted, with the quiet confidence of someone who'd spent 3 days learning to control technology that had been designed to control her. Danny's gift shows me exactly where each child is, and their fear patterns tell me how to help them break free. Danny nodded, his supernatural abilities now enhanced beyond anything his great-grandmother could have imagined. I can feel all of them. But there's something else in that building, something that's been waiting for us. The warehouse doors opened without resistance, as if the building itself wanted to surrender its secrets. Inside, they found a facility that looked like a cross between a medical laboratory and a prison. Clean white walls lined with cells containing children ranging in age from 5 to 16, all connected to monitoring equipment that tracked their neural activity around the clock. But it was the figure in the central laboratory that made James's heart stop completely. Dr. Lisa Harrison, Emma's mother, James's wife, the woman who'd supposedly died 4 years ago, stood behind a wall of reinforced glass, her brilliant mind clearly intact, but her body showing the effects of years of captivity. She was working frantically at a computer terminal, her fingers flying across keyboards as she tried to disable the neural control systems from the inside. "Mommy!" Emma's voice echoed through the facility's speakers as her neural implants interfaced with every electronic system in the building. Lisa looked up, and the expression of pure joy that crossed her face was worth more than all of James's billions combined. "Emma, my baby girl, is that really you?" "I'm here, Mommy, and I brought Daddy and our new friend Danny to take everyone home." Danny stepped forward, His gift now expanded through Emma's neural network to encompass the entire facility. "Dr. Harrison, we can see you, but we need to know how to free all the children safely. The neural implants are more complex than we realized." Lisa's voice crackled through the intercom system, and James could hear the brilliant scientist who'd first made him fall in love with her mind. "The implants can be safely deactivated, but only if we do it simultaneously across all subjects. If we try to free them one at a time, the remaining systems will overload and cause permanent brain damage. Then we do them all at once," Emma said with determination that reminded everyone why this 7-year-old had already defeated a criminal empire. "Danny, can you help me reach all of them?" Danny placed his hands on the facility's central computer system, and suddenly his consciousness expanded beyond anything human beings were meant to experience. Through Emma's neural network, he could feel the thoughts and emotions of 17 children who'd been imprisoned and experimented on for years. But he could also feel something else: the love that had kept them alive, the hope that had sustained them, the unbreakable human spirit that no technology could ever truly control. "Everyone listen to my voice," Emma spoke through the facility's speakers, her words reaching every child simultaneously. "You don't know me, but I'm like you. I've been controlled by the bad people's machines, but today we take back control together." What happened next would be studied by neuroscientists for generations. 17 children, guided by Emma's neural patterns and supported by Danny's supernatural gift, simultaneously overrode their control implants and reclaimed their own minds. The facility's lights flickered and surged as years of stolen neural energy was suddenly returned to its rightful owners. Cell doors throughout the building opened automatically. Monitoring equipment shut down as the children it had been tracking stood up and walked free for the first time in years. And in the central laboratory, the security door that had held Lisa Harrison prisoner for 4 years finally opened. The reunion that followed was everything James had dreamed about during the darkest nights of the past 4 years. Emma ran into her mother's arms with the speed of someone who'd been waiting her entire conscious life for this moment. Lisa held her daughter close, tears streaming down her face as she felt Emma's thoughts through the neural connection they now shared. "I never stopped looking for you," Lisa whispered. "Even when they told me you'd forgotten about me, I never stopped trying to get back to you." "I remembered, Mommy," Emma said, her 7-year-old voice filled with wisdom beyond her years. "The neural implants couldn't erase love. Nothing can erase love." Danny stood nearby, watching the family reunion with a smile that hadn't crossed his face since before his parents died. But his gift was also showing him something wonderful. Each of the 17 children was being reunited with families who'd never stopped looking, never stopped hoping, never stopped believing that love was stronger than any technology designed to destroy it. James knelt down beside Danny, this homeless boy who'd saved his entire world. "Danny, I know you've been living on the streets since your parents died, but if you'd like, Emma and I and Lisa, we'd love for you to come home with us, as part of our family." Danny's gift, for the first time since he discovered it, showed him something purely beautiful, a future filled with love, safety, and the chance to use his abilities to help other people, instead of just surviving day by day. "I'd like that very much," Danny said softly. 6 months later, the Harrison Foundation for Neural Freedom had become the world's leading organization dedicated to protecting children from technological exploitation. Emma, now 8 years old and fully in control of abilities that astounded scientists worldwide, had become the youngest person ever to address the United Nations about children's rights. Danny Miller Harrison, for he'd taken the family name when James and Lisa officially adopted him, used his gift to help law enforcement agencies around the world locate missing children and expose criminal organizations that preyed on the innocent. And James Harrison learned that sometimes the greatest technology in the world isn't artificial intelligence or neural networks or billion-dollar software systems. Sometimes the greatest technology is the simple, unbreakable connection between people who choose to love each other no matter what darkness tries to separate them. As Emma liked to say during her speeches to world leaders, love is the only neural network that can never be hacked, never be controlled, and never be destroyed. And that's the most powerful technology of all.